So Bill O'Reilly is going to talk to contributor Kirsten Powers about the idea of free education as well as some entitlement programs to the poor. And of course, Bill O'Reilly is going to start out by saying something completely untrue and ridiculous. Take a listen.
I think that the argument can be made that, and millions of Americans have done it, that you can get a good education, but you must work for it. And there's a lot of scholarship money available here in New York City. Poor minority students who perform well can get free college tuition, and that's the case in a lot of places. But to demand free college for all Americans on the community college and state college level will bankrupt the nation. It is an astronomical expense, astronomical. I think there's a middle ground that could happen. But the overarch is, from Bernie Sanders in particular, and Hillary's only doing this because Sanders is kicking her butt in the polls in some states. The overarch is, look, we're going to give you everything. You saw the rundown of Sanders, 18 trillion? Come on. I mean, this is insane.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm going to have to push back against pretty much all of that because most of it was nonsense. All right, for one, well, if you want to go to college, well, you got to work for it. You got to work for it. Well, doesn't O'Reilly realize that college actually is work? I'm just saying, like, it's not as if most people are coasting through college doing beer bongs, right? Or playing beer pong or whatever. Some people are, of course, that happens. Mostly on the weekends when there isn't work to do. But most people, most schools that I've went to, and I've, went to a couple of different colleges. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but most students don't do that. They actually do work hard, and they're loaded with classwork and homework, and usually they do work. They have a job on top of that. So that's a ridiculous talking point. Well, they must work for it. Well, they are working. School is work. It's just work that you don't get paid for. A lot of people in school are very hardworking. They do a lot in their studies. People invest a lot into their own education, especially when they're paying for it. And especially when their future career depends on it. All right. So now on to some ridiculous points and away from my personal opinion on the college thing, on the cost of college. Now, O'Reilly said that free college, the cost is astronomical. It would bankrupt America. Astronomical. Well, does he have any numbers to back that up? Well, no, I didn't think so. Well, I do. According to numbers from the Department of Education, they did an estimate on how much universal higher education would be. And this is in 2012 numbers. Now, it would cost a total, free education, that would cost a total of $62 billion a year. Well, no, holy shit, that is a lot of money, right? Astronomical? It depends on who you're asking. It depends on what you're doing. If it's actually a program that helps people get an education, it's astronomical. But let's look at another number. Let's compare something else. According to numbers from the right-leaning Cato Institute, corporate welfare, which consists of subsidies to different businesses. Do you know how much that costs per year? That costs nearly $100 billion a year. Well, by Bill O'Reilly's logic, that's astronomical, and we should immediately end that program. We should immediately end all corporate welfare. Gone. Can't afford it. It's bankrupting America. Now, if you were to come out and say that, I would clap, I would cheer. Way to go, Bill! But he's not saying that, is he? No, he's not saying that. Never will say that. Why? Because Bill O'Reilly, the right wing, they love corporate welfare. And yes, so do corporate Democrats as well. We have a political class in this country that loves giving out freebies to corporations. That has to stop. Because as you can see, $100 billion a year. That's super expensive. We can't afford that. Literally. Now, not only that, right? Not only are those numbers $62 billion, right? That's how much the college would cost. You know how much we spend right now on college? On things like Pell Grants and other programs related to college? We actually spend about $69 billion. We spend more right now than the projected cost of Bernie Sanders' free college plan. According to these numbers from the New America Foundation, the government spent $69 billion in 2013 on different financial aid programs, such as the Pell Grant for low-income students, tax breaks, work-study funding, and that doesn't even include loans. The government now handles a lot of student loans, and they're actually making bank off of it. Here's the federal government making billions of dollars off loans from students. They're just raking it in. So, O'Reilly doesn't even bother to bring any of this up. Instead, he says, well, it'll bankrupt America. It'll bankrupt America. Now, the funny thing is that he calls one segment of his show the No Spin Zone. I would counter and say that right now, he's in the no fact zone. Now, it gets worse because now he's going to shift it from college and shift the blame onto poor people. Watch.
But yet some Americans, and that's what my next question is to you, why do they think they're owed all this by the government? What is that mentality? I don't get that. I never took a penny from the government.
It's not this idea that, so Democrats believe that people are entitled to certain things. They're entitled to health care. They're entitled to food. They're entitled to some basic necessities of life. What you call free stuff and what Jeb Bush calls free stuff that actually are necessities in life. So the problem with when he said free stuff is that he's talking about children getting food. He's talking about people who, a lot of the people who receive welfare, even the adults, are working poor. They're people who have jobs, but they don't have enough money to get food.
That myth has been busted time and time again.
Sure, it's not a myth.
If you look at the studies of poverty,
at least 50% are working.
If you look at the studies of poverty, most poor people in this country have computers, have big screen TVs, have cars, have air conditioning. This myth that there are kids who don't have anything to eat is a total lie. And
it is absolutely not a lie.
It is absolutely a total lie on a mass level.
There are kids in New York City who go all weekend without anything to eat except when they eat in the schools.
That is such a biggest baloney.
Absolutely a fact.
You
and I know
produce
it's a fact.
You produce one.
I know. I know that because of the churches that I've worked with in New York City who serve those children.
I mean, there are food banks in these churches, and it goes back to the parents who are usually derelicts of some kind,
I'm sorry,
and who squander the food stamps that come in, who sell them on the black market. This is insane. You're telling me that you believe in the United States of America, with all the entitlement programs and food stamps and everything else, there are urchins running around that don't have any food because of the system?
Children.
Urchins. What are we, in a Charles Dickens novel? You're going to bring up street urchins? Oh, I can't believe those urchins running around in America going hungry. Must be the parents' fault. Must be them being lazy. I'll get to that in a minute. Now, as far as those studies, well, where are the studies, Bill? Are they in, like, the Drudge Report or Breitbart? I mean, where are you getting this bullshit from? But it doesn't really matter, though, I guess, when it comes down to it. Because, look, just because you have a refrigerator and a laptop, that doesn't mean that you're not poor. There are actually a lot of low-income apartments that have air conditioners built in, that have central air. Just because you have central air, just because you have an air conditioner, doesn't mean you can afford to actually run it. And you can get cheap TVs, of course, from pawn shops. There are places where you can get cheap stuff. And I know a lot of people complain, poor people have cell phones. What do you need a cell phone for? To get a hold of people. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore. Cell phones, they're pretty cheap. You can get one for like $10. You pay $10 a month for minutes. I mean, there are things that people have, that poor people have, that are necessities. You need a car to get to a job. Most of the people on welfare do work. And Kirsten Powers brings that up, but at least she tried to until she was fucking filibustered by Bill O'Reilly and shouted down. But anyway, so let's go to where he blames parents for trafficking. Oh, they use all the food stamps. They sell them, they traffic them. Really? Well, let's get to some numbers here. See, unlike Bill O'Reilly, I can actually cite my studies, and I can actually cite my data. For example, the food stamp fraud rate, according to USDA numbers, is less than 1%. That includes the trafficking that Bill O'Reilly points out. You see, the USDA, it's federal money, they kind of take fraud really, really seriously, and they crack down on it. And actually, according to the USDA, they found that smaller stores, mom and pop shops mostly, smaller medium stores, that generally don't stock healthier foods, they actually have a higher fraud rate. Now, these people that don't have access to healthier food, maybe they'd like to trade it. I know it's wrong, but they might be able to trade it so they can go and buy healthier food elsewhere. I don't know. That could be a possibility. I'm speculating, but when it comes to the rate of trafficking at larger stores that actually do have access to better foods, fresh foods, they actually have a trafficking rate of 0.5%. Well, look at any program. If a program that a conservative came up with had a 0.5% fraud rate, they would be cheering. Oh my God, look at how efficient that is, especially if it was a private market, a privatized entity. If it had a fraud rate or an error rate of 0.5%, they'd be cheering like, oh my God, this is super effective. But when it comes to a government program, fraud, plagued with fraud. How could you? There's so much fraud. And once again, facts bear out that Bill O'Reilly is living in the no-fact zone. I've got more. I actually have more statistics, more facts on child poverty. Now, according to the advocacy group No Kid Hungry, they stated that more than 474,000 children in New York are at risk of hunger. Now, on the national level, the Department of Agriculture reported that last year that 16 million children had inconsistent levels of access to food. The department stated that 49 million Americans had trouble eating regularly. Now, you have issues with food deserts, where you don't have access to good food, where you do have those smaller stores, which happen to have higher rates of trafficking. Now, the USDA knows this, and they're continuously trying to stamp out more fraud by holding these stores accountable, which is what you should do. That's good government. That's government that's smart and effective. This is a smart, effective program. And Bill O'Reilly shits all over it because he has an agenda. Now, when it comes to America, I like what he said. Well, America, how are people having a problem? Yeah, how can they not find something to eat in America with all these welfare programs? Well, it turns out that yes, even in America, people are still poor. And no, it's not always their fault. See, we have an economic system that heavily favors the rich and powerful. Rich and powerful people like Bill O'Reilly, for example. The idea that poor people can still be poor and still be hungry, even though they get food stamps and welfare, well, that breaks O'Reilly's brain. The hamster falls off the wheel. I cannot compute. How is it that we're giving poor people money and they're still poor? Yeah, but look at how much we're giving them, and look how much money actually, how much that those food stamps actually stretch. And I've got more data on that as well. The fact is that the average recipient of food stamp gets the equivalent of $1 a meal, or roughly about $3 to $4 a day. Now, this is one reason why I think you do see people loading up on pop and junk food. Now, a lot of people will get after people about that, like, why aren't you buying anything healthy? Why aren't you buying anything healthy? Well, when you get $137 a month, you're going to get what gets the most bang for your buck. And that just happens to be cheap, processed junk foods. When you have, a bottle of pop that costs about 99 cents versus a bottle of juice that's something like $3, you're going to get much cheaper. You're always going to shop, especially when you're on such a limited budget, you're going to get much cheaper. That's common sense, even though it's not the best thing for you. Now, I'm not saying that you can't shop well on a budget, that you can't shop well or healthy doing this. There are ways that you can do it, but it is very difficult, especially if you're in one of those areas that is a food desert. Now, this is why celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow often fail the food stamp challenge, because they think they can just walk into the store, into a Whole Foods, and pick up a bunch of stuff for a month and survive on that. Well, they can't. They have to shop cheaply. They have to know how to shop cheaply. And what's cheaper, unfortunately, is processed foods. Now, they're working on getting it to where they can have farmers markets that will allow you to buy fresh fruits and vegetables with the SNAP program, with food stamp program. So, and that would help. Now, as far as right now, in a lot of stores, you can't buy things like organic juice or organic vegetables or something like that. You have to buy sodas. Pop is cheaper than juice, and water's free. But unless if you live in some place like Flint that has terrible water, you can't exactly drink the water. So you have to buy bottled water, which is also expensive. The point is, processed food is cheap, especially things that have corn in them, because after all, we subsidize the shit out of corn. We do. And that's why it's super cheap. If we ended up subsidizing healthier foods, poor people on food stamps would eat better. You don't want to feed your kids junk if you can afford it. You know, if you can afford not to. But if you can't afford it, you're going to get junk. And you're going to have not as healthy outcomes. You're going to have higher rates of obesity. You're going to have things. So that's something that I would like to see change in the food stamp program. But instead of doing that, Republicans are like, no, let's make pizza a vegetable. Yeah, they classified pizza as a vegetable. Let's cut food stamps. Let's do all this. Let's cut the legs out from under people so that they don't eat healthier. Okay, well, there you go. Look, unfortunately, the facts here about food stamps, the fact about how efficient you can make a program that doesn't have a profit motive attached to it, well, that doesn't fit into the O'Reilly poor people are lazy and irresponsible narrative. That's why he doesn't bring this stuff up. That's why he doesn't talk about this. That's why he says nothing about any of this and tries to offer actual solutions to make the program more efficient, to make sure people that are on that eat healthier. He doesn't do that because it doesn't fit into that narrative. And it is a shame. It is a shame that he has so many viewers and such little factual information. But I guess it's more easy and it's more popular to demonize poor people than to actually solve the issues of poverty and access to affordable higher education.